When we think of Apple, we often think of perfection, meticulous calculation, and a strictly guarded ecosystem. The word iPhone today is not just the name of a phone. It is a global cultural icon, a money-making machine that has reshaped the entire 21st century. But there is a harsh truth that Apple rarely wants to mention. Steve Jobs did not invent the name iPhone. Worse yet, at that exact historic moment in 2007, when Jobs stood on stage and proudly introduced this device to the whole world, Apple didn't even legally own the rights to that name. This recklessness sparked a brutal global legal war. You are watching Channel Behind the Brand. Today, we're going to reopen the files to uncover the billion-dollar battle behind the name iPhone. But if Steve Jobs isn't the father of this name, who is the real owner? And how did a name born in the dial-up internet era become the center of a dispute involving a Silicon Valley giant? Let's turn back time. The truth is, the name iPhone was born even before the first iPod appeared. Let's go back to September 3rd, 1993. Nearly a decade and a half before Steve Jobs announced his phone, a tech company named Infogear filed a trademark application for the name iPhone in the US. Infogear's vision at that time was incredibly ahead of its time. They wanted to create a device that integrated phone functions, a personal computer, and data access. By June 2000, the telecommunications giant Cisco Systems acquired Infogear, and naturally, Cisco officially became the legal owner of the iPhone trademark. Around the same time, Apple also began eyeing this title. Starting in October 2002, Apple quietly filed for the iPhone trademark in the UK, Australia, Singapore, and Europe. To bypass the media and competitors, Apple even used front companies like Ocean Telecom Services to secretly register the trademark in several other countries. Things in the international market seemed to go smoothly, but on their home turf in the US, the power of life and death over this name lay in Cisco's hands. The two sides entered negotiations, but Cisco firmly laid out strict conditions to protect its asset. Faced with a solid legal wall named Cisco, many companies would choose to back down or rename their product. But Steve Jobs was notoriously impatient. So, what happens when a dictator like Jobs decides to break all the rules just to achieve his goal? On the evening before the Macworld event in January 27, Cisco was confident that Apple would accept the final agreement contract they had just sent. But they were wrong. Steve Jobs decided to play an incredibly arrogant open hand. On January 9, 2007, Jobs stepped up to the podium and boldly declared to millions of people, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone." And he called it the iPhone. Steve Jobs announced the product under that name as a done deal, despite the fact that Apple had not yet signed a trademark agreement with Cisco. Cisco's anger exploded. Just one day after that shocking launch, January 10, 2007, Cisco officially filed a lawsuit against Apple in federal court for trademark infringement, seeking an injunction to ban Apple from using the name. This was a fatal blow. This lawsuit could have easily strangled the iPhone in its crib and destroyed Apple's billion-dollar marketing campaign. But sometimes the law has to bow down to power and money. Instead of facing off in court, Apple used its massive resources to apply negotiating pressure. Just a little over a month later, on February 20th, 2007, the two sides suddenly announced they had reached an agreement. Apple was allowed to use the iPhone name, and in return, they promised to explore interoperability with Cisco's security products. A swift compromise, reeking of money and power. However, the world is much bigger than the US. Apple might have used its power to settle things smoothly with Cisco, but when bringing the iPhone to the global stage, they stumbled upon a bitter truth. The name iPhone had already been claimed everywhere. And how Apple dealt with these local companies truly exposes their ruthless nature. The journey to snatch the iPhone name in the international market reveals a harsh business philosophy. When you are big and powerful enough, sometimes the law is just an obstacle that can be trampled over. In Mexico, the trademark iPhone, pronounced exactly like iPhone, had been registered by a local telecommunications company since 2003. Instead of negotiating, Apple used its power to countersue them to claim the name. But the Supreme Court of Mexico sided with the local company, ruling that Apple was the actual infringer. In Brazil, a similar scenario unfolded. The company Gradiente registered the iPhone trademark in 2000. In late 2012, this company even released a phone running Android and named it iPhone. Apple was furious and threw everything into a legal battle. Although the Brazilian authorities initially ruled that the ownership belonged to Gradiente through sheer persistence and a massive legal budget, Apple finally turned the tide in 2014, winning the right to use the trademark in Brazil without paying a single dime in royalties. But the most biting commentary on Apple's greed came from the Philippines. When Apple sued a conglomerate producing a phone called MyPhone, the director of the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines dismissed the lawsuit and left a historic remark. "This is a case of a giant try to claim more territory than what it is entitled to the great prejudice of a local Pinoy phone merchant." These battles raise a profound ethical question. Does great innovation justify a corporation's bullying behavior? Apple was wildly successful, but they also proved a brutal reality of capitalism. Truth doesn't always belong to the one who arrives first. Truth often belongs to the one with enough power to rewrite the rules. So ultimately, looking back over the past 15 years, what lesson do all these wars over a single name leave us with? Let's look at the reality today. Nobody remembers Gradiente's Android running iPhone in Brazil. Nor does anyone know what Vision Infogir or Cisco once harbored for that name in the 90s. The name iPhone has now been completely swallowed up and merged as one with Apple. It proves a philosophical truth about core value. A name, no matter how catchy, does not create value by itself. It is the breakthrough product, the excellent user experience, and the massive ecosystem behind it that breathe life into and determine the value of that name. Steve Jobs took a name that didn't belong to him. He ignored the rules and played the game of power. But no one can deny that he and the Apple team are the only ones on this planet who could make the whole world desire that name. Thank you for joining me in uncovering this story full of hidden corners. You are watching channel Behind the Brand. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a comment telling us what you think about Apple's domineering attitude in this matter. See you guys again very soon in the next video. Cheers guys, have a good one.